aliens. Positively sure I'm absolutely mad about something. Oh, I'm positively sure I'm absolutely crazy too. Oh.
Hi, my name's Mark Stowell and welcome to Little Green Man, where politics of the Canadian variety is considered very, very sexy. If we are to take self-proclaiming right-wingers, conservatives, libertarians and other neoliberals at their word, they hate regulations. And they're the first and loudest to shout against them. Regulations are bad, evil, disgusting, get rid of them! But here in Manitoba, our Orwellianly named progressive conservatives have actually named a day after their hatred of regulations. It's called Red Tape Reduction Day, or as I call it, Anti-Human Neoliberal Ideology Day. But why do they think regulations are bad? Because it impinges on our freedoms and liberties, they say. Except they don't. Most regulations don't infringe on an average human being's liberties at all. Many regulations ensure freedom and liberty. Some regulations ensure liberty and freedom from being harmed or killed at work, or ensure that people can't easily get ripped off by loan sharks and so on. Actually, regulations prevent businesses and corporations and the rich people that own them from making bagloads more money than they want to make. You see, they can't make enough of the stuff. I'm sure you know the capitalist mantra, gimme, 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 more, 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 mine, mine, mine. And from that point of view, regulations are bad because they stop businesses from making obscene amounts of money, because keeping people safe from harm and not ripping them off costs corporations and the rich people that own them the profits. Or it prevents them from legally stealing more money, and that, they say, is wrong. Voter ID! No, I didn't just change the subject. I'm still talking about regulations, except this regulation is good. It is holy, it is wonderful, and we must spread it around the world. At least the leaders of conservative parties say so. The voter ID is a regulation, make no mistake about that. It is a regulation that is now a requirement in many states right across the US. It is now here to a lesser degree in Manitoba, and make no mistake, it is a regulation that conservatives all around the world and the people who preach that regulations are bad say is good. Even though regulations are bad, oh, it's a good job I'm not a Star Trek robot, because my head would have exploded on that one. Now, the voter ID regulation actually prevents people from voting. Many people don't have photo ID, so they need to go out of their way to get some. Some people can't afford photo ID. And of course, what about people who don't own a house, can't find permanent residence, or are transient, whether homeless on the streets or sleeping on a friend's couch or whatever? Now, for some people, voting is the only thing they need photo ID for. This is tantamount to a poll tax. You have to pay the government to vote. It disenfranchises the poor, people who would likely vote against right-wing parties. So now you see why, in the eyes of conservative leaders, this regulation is good and holy. But I hear you cry, what about voter fraud? To which I say, what voter fraud? It is virtually non-existent. In the UK, where they have just started to try out the voter ID laws, was there a need for it? There must be, otherwise why would the regulation haters be fighting so hard for this regulation? The answer is no, a resounding no. In 2017, there was only one conviction for voter impersonation in the UK, meaning there was only one verifiable instance of voter impersonation. But reports show that in last week's borough council elections, dozens of people were prevented from voting. If these laws went countrywide, it could mean thousands upon thousands of people would get refused a chance to vote. All to defend against a single verifiable case of voter fraud. And likewise in Canada, voter impersonation at the ballot box, just like in the UK and the US, is virtually non-existent. A single false case of voter fraud will likely make no difference at all, but thousands of people being denied a vote could swing an election. This regulation actually produces the effect that the cowardly conservatives say we must regulate against. It has been public knowledge for decades that the fewer people that turn up at the polls, the higher the proportion of the vote go that the conservative parties get. And the more people who show up to vote, the higher the proportion of votes go to centrist or left-wing parties. There is no voter fraud to speak of. Voter ID is itself the fraud. A need for security where security isn't needed. A regulation on human beings that restricts their ability to vote. So let's back up. It's worth understanding why regulations prevent corporations and the rich people that own them from making more money. Regulations serve two purposes, as I said earlier, to reduce the risk of physical harm to you and your family, friends, and fellow human beings, making people wear a harness when going up on a scissor lift or a cherry picker, putting physical barriers up in a factory to prevent workers from losing toes, fingers, or even from being killed. They reduce pollution from poisoning your drinking water supply, so you don't die of lead poisoning.
Flint still doesn't have clean water.
Yeah, what she said. And secondly, it is to prevent you from being ripped off financially, say by onerous interest rates from loan sharks, like private banks, being overcharged for something or not getting the product you paid for, and making sure your employer pays you for the work you've done, like minimum wage and overtime rates and so on. Following these regulations costs corporations time and money. Money they would rather put in the pockets of the rich people that own them. Who cares if you or your family get ripped off financially or die working for them? Well, they don't. But regulations on citizens apparently is not only okay, it is absolutely necessary to keep the human beings under control. Regulations on corporations and the rich people that own them are evil, but regulations on ordinary people like you and me are wholly good, especially if they discourage you or they prevent you from voting for the other party. Because to neoliberals, human beings don't matter at all. Little green man. This is the back door to the Manitoba legislature. Now, if you hit the subscribe button now, hit the notification bell, then you won't be surprised when they try to stick something up your back door.